Welcome to America at Play and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm your host, Butch Cons, and my co-host is Miami GOP committee woman and accomplished journalist Angie Wong. We are joined tonight by former U.S. federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of North Carolina and world-known super attorney, Bobby Higdon, and we are here to talk politics.
Hey, Bobby. Great to
Guys,
meet
welcome.
you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you for wearing green, Butch, on St. Patty's Day. I didn't get the memo clearly.
Well, I changed it the last minute, to be honest with you, Angie. I haven't been wearing it all day. But folks, let's talk about something that's really been in the news a lot. A lot of people don't understand what it is. And Bobby, I'm going to ask you to kick us off on this and give us a really good definition, first of all, of what lawfare is.
Well, lawfare seems to, it's a new phenomenon as best I can tell, but it seems to be, weaponizing the criminal justice system to the detriment of your opponent. And certainly that has been, a subject of much debate in the last, 4 to 8, maybe 10 years, particularly as President Trump came on the scene and people reacted strongly to him. And he has certainly, suggested very strongly that the criminal justice system was weaponized against him, and I think, therefore, lawfare.
Gotcha. Okay. Angie, what's your thought on lawfare?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to talk about this topic because it's kind of been going along. I mean, we've been dealing with lawfare quite some time. We've only just nicknamed it lawfare now, right? Those in litigation understands that if you are sued or part of any sort of suit, it takes years to unravel sometimes, right? And in the political timeline, you don't always have years. What if you're running a campaign? You've got 18 months to win an election. And if you're tied up in lawfare, I wonder if there's something that the courts can do, because clearly this is common stay. This is something that's always going to be here going forward. We've seen it we've seen it since the Bill Clinton days, didn't we? Right. So now it's been sped up, and even Trump is using it to an extent. He understands how important justices are and how important our courts are, and to appoint the right judges, because right now, look at what the Democrats are doing. They're just all they have left, because they don't have the House or the Senate or the White House, they have Obama appointed judges left, right? I mean, so how do you, Bobby, deal with that if your executive orders are going to be blocked or challenged, or even like this, the latest thing with the Tren de Agua, with all the gangs being shipped back to South America? A federal judge was trying to block that airplane from flying out of our own country, right? How do you deal with that going forward?
Well, it's a really complicated issue, and I think that one of the things that is really problematic is the habit of federal district court judges around the country to issue orders that they say cover the entire country. I mean, so the idea, as in this most recent one, is a judge sitting in one of the 94 federal districts decides that, for whatever reason, that he or she believes that they should enjoin or otherwise, halt the enforcement of a particular action by the administration, and they make it applicable to everyone in the country. And so, that's an incredible bit of authority for someone just sitting in a local court, say here in Raleigh, North Carolina, to have, when you're talking about, particularly in this case, about the enforcement of the immigration laws and the conduct of foreign policy by the President of the United States. And so it seems to me that one of the things that's going to have to happen is the Supreme Court is going to have to clarify what is the authority of federal district court judges, because what's happening is that people are forum shopping. They're looking around for the judge that they think is most likely to grant their request, and it seems like they have an uncanny ability to do that. And so they go in and they get the judge to issue an order that is supposed to apply to the specific case that you have in front of you. I mean, that's really what judges do, is they deal with the case in front of them. But what they're doing is they're expanding their rulings to cover the entire country and to cover this entire issue. And so I think that what's going to happen is the court is going to have to clarify whether that is permissible or not. And I surely hope that they can clarify it in a way where it is not permissible. But to me, that's the biggest problem. But you're right. You know, it is not new that one party or the other, whenever they're in power, they will issue orders that will direct action, and then the opposite party will look for a way to halt that, to stymie what they're doing, and often the courts are the way they do it. And I will tell you, it certainly appears to me that the left is much better at doing this, and they've been doing it a lot longer than the right has. And so this has been a way that they have tried to slow down policies that they don't agree with when they don't have the authority within the government system to do it themselves.
But Bobby, let me ask you a question. And it is kind of simplified here, but you said it earlier, the district court. Okay, these federal judges are district judges. They're not Supreme Court. They're supposed to be just like when you were a prosecutor, you were the Eastern District of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so aren't those judges supposed to stay within their box of that district?
Well, that's what I'm saying is that, judges are supposed to deal with the case that's right in front of them. They're supposed to deal with the case as narrowly as they can, and the case has to have some connection to their district. In other words, there has to be venue in their district. And so there are a number of legal problems when judges expand that and they began issuing orders that deal with the conduct of foreign policy or even just the operation of government functions around the country. They're taking unto themselves the ability to affect policy on a nationwide level when we have people that are empowered to do that. We have, at the Supreme Court level, in the Congress, and the president himself. And so they're really taking an unbelievable amount of power and authority to this one specific judge. And as I alluded to, there are 94 federal districts around the country. So this tells you how much power they're taking on when they purport to rule on behalf of the entire country from that one seat in that one district, wherever it may be.
Bobby, how do you feel about the appointments so far that Trump has put out on some of the districts? I know that it's going to take some time before all the federal prosecutors are appointed, but how do you feel about his picks so far?
Well, I don't know much about there've been very few picks on the district level, and some of those are generally just acting. And most of the districts right now are being run by people who have been in those offices for a while. They're generally taking over because of the operation of law, waiting on a United States attorney to be appointed. So most of those people, I don't know anything about them, and most districts are being run in that way. So really, all I can speak to is the people at the national level in the Justice Department. And I got to tell you, I'm pretty impressed with them. Despite what has been said in the media, when you look at these individuals, they are very principled individuals. They are people with, in their particular area of responsibility, a lot of experience. For example, the new deputy attorney general, he was one of Trump's lawyers in the New York case, and that's all people want to talk about. But he has a long history of being in private practice. He was a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York for a number of years. He was a leader in that office, and so I think that's the kind of combination you would look for in either party appointing someone to be the deputy attorney general. The attorney general herself, long history as a prosecutor at the state level, but there's nothing inconsequential about that. That's really important work. And I think it's very valuable to have someone that's from outside the Beltway in Washington. I mean, she clearly has an understanding about how laws are enforced and how crime is prosecuted in a major state that had major criminal justice problems. So I think these are impressive picks. He's put people at the FBI who have a long history in law enforcement. They understand the principles behind how you enforce the law, how you investigate cases. And so I'm very encouraged by the people that he's selected. I think they are principled people. I think they've come to town to make some changes, which are incredibly necessary. And so I think we can expect good things from it. It's going to take some time, and they're getting their sea legs right now. But they've only been in office a few weeks, and so I think they've already got an impressive track record. And I have high hopes for the direction they're heading.
Bobby, I've got two things I want to hit here very quickly. Number one, do these district judges actually have I know it's a question of whether they have the authority or not, but it's a little weird to me. You got this guy from Columbia University who had a green card, and Rubio pulled his green card, and they're deporting him with not a whole lot of fanfare. Okay, I mean, there's some grumbling and yelling and screaming, but for the most part, but you got a judge over here who's saying he wanted to bring back these thugs and these gangs when they were here illegally. They should have never been here to start with. It seems kind of backwards that he's gonna jump in for their rights, which, as far as I'm concerned, and I believe I'm right on this, they have no constitutional rights. They're here illegally. Okay, but yet the guy with the green card is an easy out. You just pull his green card, and he's out. So, what's your thought on that? Because it kind of is backwards.
Yeah. Well, I think these two cases, when you put them next to each other, what it amounts to is who got to the courthouse in time and who could get attention. And certainly, I mean, I think it's the ACLU that's pushing the case for these thugs that were deported because they were a member of a gang.
They are.
Which, you know, that's a whole nother topic in terms of the ACLU's role in these types of things. But, you know, individuals that are being prosecuted criminally, whether they're illegal, whether they're American citizens, they have constitutional rights. But that's not what's going on here. These people are not being prosecuted criminally. They're being dealt with through the civil and administrative immigration system. And when you compare those to the president and in this case, the Secretary of State acting on the president's behalf, pursuant to the law, they have very broad authority to enforce the immigration laws from an administrative and civil perspective. And, you know, for example, the fellow that you were talking about in New York, who's been an advocate for, you know, Hamas and other terrorist activities, Secretary Rubio, I think he said it exactly right, is he has no right to be in the country. He has a green card, which permits him to be in the country, but he doesn't have a right to the green card. And so all the Secretary of State has to do and did do is, you know, declare that he is not someone that's here in the best interest of the United States, revoke the green card, and here's your plane ticket home. And so I think that's what's happening here. The same ought to be true with respect to these gang members. If you're not going to prosecute them criminally, then they're here illegally, so they don't even have the same claim that the fellow from New York has, because he at least had you know, authorization to be here. They didn't. They came here totally illegally. And so there's no need to, you know, sort of decertify them. You put them on a plane. And they don't really have any rights. I mean, there is a process that gets followed, but they don't really have any rights in terms of constitutional rights. They would if the federal government chose to prosecute them, and could do that for being here illegally. And I'm sure there's other criminal activity they've been engaged in, but just their presence alone makes them criminals. And that's one of the things in the debate that I really find irritating that gets lost, is everyone talks about no one's illegal, you know, all this. When you are here without having followed the normal process to be admitted into the country pursuant to our immigration laws, or you are here without authorization, you are a criminal, because you have violated our laws, which prohibit that type of act being here. Now, there's not a huge penalty that goes along with it, but it is still a crime. And so, you know, to me, the government could make a choice to proceed against them criminally. They chose not to do that, which is not an unreasonable position to take, because they felt like it's better to get them out of the country. So they have very limited procedural rights. And so I'm not exactly sure what the judge's logic is in number one, saying that they have to remain here, and number two, you got to turn a plane around. That's really beyond me. And so it sounded like to me what happened is they made it all the way to their destination before the order was issued. And so the administration really has no authority to go into that country and say, give them back to us.
I mean, are there any remedies to these federal judges or even district judges that just decide to make up these orders that go against the Trump administration? I don't know. Is there any remedies to remove them, as I've heard online, or some of them are there for life, right?
Well, they're all there for life. They're federal judges. They're all there for life. If they're Article III judges appointed by a president and confirmed by the Senate, then that's who we're talking about in these cases. They are there for life. And the only remedy for removing them or disciplining them is removal through the impeachment process in the House of Representatives and a trial in the U.S. Senate and then removal. That's the only remedy for dealing with them.
I wonder if that's coming down the pipeline. Bobby, I have a question for you about something that came up in the news today. Donald Trump, just a few hours ago, revoked any of the Joe Biden pardons in his last few hours in office, saying that, well, an auto pen wrote out his signature. Now, there's so many things to unpack about this. One, is it forgery? Because we know forgery is a crime. Two, can the next president revoke the previous president's pardon? I mean, have we ever seen anything like this before?
I have, it's interesting because I wondered if this issue would come up when you saw that there were so many pardons and there were questions about President Biden's competence and his performance in office. I just wondered to myself, would this issue come up? And so I found it fascinating today when President Trump announced that he would basically give no meaning, no value to these pardons. I have no idea, just to be honest with you, I have no idea how this comes out. The president in general has unchecked power under the Constitution to issue pardons. And there's nothing that you can do about it. And I'll have to tell you, when President Biden issued some of these pardons, a couple of them were people who were prosecuted while I was the United States Attorney here in the Eastern District of North Carolina. And the argument was they're nonviolent drug offenders. Well, all you have to do is Google their names to see what press releases we issued at the time of their prosecution. And it was all about them being violent drug traffickers and criminals. I mean, so I don't know who was making that argument or pitching that to the administration, suggesting they were nonviolent, but it was totally incorrect. And I was stunned that no one covered that even here in the Eastern District. I mean, these were pretty significant offenders in the communities where they were operating. And so my one thought was, well, a number of people called me, and I'm like, there's nothing we can do about it. The president has totally unchecked authority. And you assume and hope that they will exercise it wisely. And there are reasons why you want a president or any executive to have pardon authority. But when you start to see large numbers of pardons that are made for policy reasons, you start to have questions about it. And then this whole new wrinkle with it being the auto pen, meaning that it's just an automatic signature. I mean, I used to work in the U.S. Senate, and I signed lots of letters by auto pen, but they were not letters where I was taking a policy position or making some dramatic decision for my boss. They were standard letters that were form letters and that type of thing. So I don't know that I've ever seen or known of anyone to use an auto pen for a really key decision, signing a bill, or in this case, issuing a pardon. And so I don't know what the legal meaning is if you can demonstrate that the president of the United States, in whom this power resides, knew nothing about it and didn't make the decision.
Well, here it gets worse, Bobby. The story gets worse. Joe Biden was not even in Washington when these things were signed. He was in South Carolina, according to one report. And we can go back and look exactly in the timeline of where he was. So what's going on here? Is this forgery? Is this elderly abuse? I don't even know.
Well, I don't know. And forgery, I mean, if the president authorized you to use the auto pen, I suppose there's a very valid argument made. Well, he doesn't have to actually, I don't know. He doesn't have to actually handle the pen if he's authorized you to do it. But it seems to me, if he hasn't authorized you to do it, if you are anyone lesser than the president that's making the decision and executing the decision, that's a whole different matter, seems to me.
You could have a power of attorney to sign a pardon?
Well, I mean, someone like the president of the United States often acts through others. And I mean, it's a big job. It's done with staff and so forth. And so, I mean, I don't know that we'd get very far if the argument is Joe Biden needed to actually wield the pen himself, although you would think that's what would happen. But I'm more concerned if we could demonstrate Joe Biden didn't know anything about this, that he didn't in any way engage in the decision making that's required. And I take it that's what President Trump is saying. I don't know how you demonstrate one side or the other of that. I mean, somebody would have to come forward and say, yeah, he had no idea. Or conversely, he did have an idea. We did talk to him about it. He authorized us to do it. But short of that, I mean, it's a really interesting question because this power resides only with one person, and that's the President of the United States.
And I bet because you have worked with President Trump before in the previous administration, that he probably already has the antidote to this. He
Well,
probably knows how this is going to all play out.
he may very well. He may very well. And I mean, I would imagine they have been looking very carefully at what are the records that demonstrate how this was done. And so, you know, when I saw that post of his today on social media, I surely took note of it because that's a very kind of controversial position to take if you don't have the goods.
Yeah.
And so I'm suspecting that they have some body of evidence that suggests that there was a problem here. But I'll be very interested to see. And then what do you do about it? Because he is in that post, he's suggesting directing, I don't know if that's too strong of a word in this case, but he's suggesting that somebody be looking into the activities of these people that are otherwise pardoned. And so, I mean, it seems to me it would come to a head if the government attempts to investigate any of those individuals, never mind tries to prosecute them, but if they attempt to investigate it and demand any type of document via subpoena or anything from them, someone's going to move to quash those subpoenas saying, you don't have the authority to prosecute us, we've been pardoned, and then you'll have it joined into court.
Oof.
Well, let me ask a question. Who do you think at the end, or maybe the whole 4 years, was actually running the White House? I mean, we know it wasn't Biden. And then the question is, when we get back to these pardons, they may not be able to prosecute the ones who received pardons, but what about the ones who gave the pardons if it wasn't Biden?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what the facts are, whether or not they were acting, you know, improperly, illegally. And, you know, I don't know. It just depends on what the evidence is as to their actions. I don't know. I don't know to what degree President Biden was running the White House. I mean, there are real questions about that. And in fact, the special prosecutor that was investigating him for his handling of classified information concluded that he was not competent to stand trial.
That's right.
And I mean, that bottom line. And
that
so,
was a couple of years.
yes,
That was a couple years ago.
Mr.
yes,
Herr.
and so it raises Rob
Yeah.
Hur. It raises the real question of, okay, if you're not competent to stand trial, are you competent to run the White House, to be the president of the United States? And no one wanted to, you know, to address that question. And that question should be handled through the 25th Amendment by members of the cabinet. And, you know, they've all said, oh, everything was fine. But that doesn't, I mean, how do you sort of make that match up with the special prosecutor who spent hours with him, questioning him, and said he is not competent to defend himself in a courtroom? So a pretty narrow thing on a narrow set of facts that he ought to be able to remember. And so if you can't do that, it really raises very serious questions about your competence to do the job, and therefore leads to your question. And I don't know the answer to that question.
It seems like a slippery slope, but it also seems like there was some illegal stuff going on and other people running the country that shouldn't have been running the country. I mean, that's what it looks like.
Well, it certainly is a legitimate question. I mean, it really is a legitimate question, and you know, it would be a legitimate question no matter what happens. But here you have a prosecutor who is put in place specifically to make this determination. And what way I read the report and what he said was, you know, otherwise we could proceed in this case, but because of his lack of competence, we can't, which is a normal analysis in cases. I've seen it all the time in cases where there's a question about the mental competence of the defendant. And that's what he's saying is it's the same thing here, is that I can't proceed because he can't participate meaningfully in his own defense. That's what it comes down to. And so, I mean, you're talking about the president of the United States.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot more to come out about
finger on
this.
a button.
Bobby, do you think everything we're talking about, all of these cases, does it all just come down to the United States Supreme Court? It seems like everything is going to be heading to the Supremes.
Well, I think when you're talking about the powers of the president and of the executive, that's where it always ends up, is it has to be ultimately defined by the Supreme Court. Now, they have a history of, in many cases, deferring to the president, because I mean they understand that the president has to execute the laws, has to run the executive branch, and that there are certain aspects of our governmental functioning that are very particularly given to the president with almost unchecked power, the pardon power being one of them, but more importantly, things like the conduct of foreign policy. The choice of criminal cases, that is is totally vested in the executive. It's executed by the Justice Department, but I mean the discretion about who to prosecute and who not to prosecute is almost unreviewable. And I was always glad about that as a prosecutor for 30 years, is I didn't have courts questioning generally my choice to prosecute or not prosecute cases. And so that's the kind of thing that is largely left to the executive, but it is all defined by Supreme Court case law. I mean, I know those things to be true because there are cases that the Supreme Court has issued in the past that tell me that.
That's awesome. Bobby, at what point, and we're going to switch it a little bit here, you know about AOC giving terrorist groups and gangs information about ICE coming in before they got there and how to get around them and so forth. At what point does giving that information to an enemy, which these gangs were, made enemies of the state a couple of weeks ago. Um, at what point does that become treason?
Interesting question. I've not seen many treason cases, but what I would suggest to you do is even back up from that, because I don't think you have to get to treason before you have them. And that is what you have these individuals doing is they're obstructing justice. And that is a much easier case
Absolutely.
to prove. It's a violation that is used much more often. Treason, I think of, you're selling our national secrets to the Russians or something like that, and while it isn't limited to that, it generally has been used in sort of those big picture situations. But if what these people did is, if what we've been told is accurate, they're obstructing justice because they are attempting to impede the enforcement of duly enacted laws against individuals. They're trying to interfere with the enforcement of those laws against individuals for whom there is probable cause to believe that they have violated the law, and the government is acting within its authority to execute arrest warrants or to apprehend people who violate the immigration laws on a criminal or administrative or civil basis. So they're moving procedurally correctly, and then you have individuals like these that you've mentioned that are apparently revealing information that is otherwise secret in order to obstruct and impede that. And I believe that's obstruction of justice, and that is prosecutable. Now, somebody like AOC may say, well, look, I'm just acting. I didn't really know anything. I really didn't. I didn't do anything to impede that work. And by the way, I'm a member of Congress, so I can do or say anything I want, which is usually their defense. So, there may be some bumps in the road in terms of pursuing those types of charges, but I really believe that this is obstructive conduct.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, how do you feel about people like Marco Rubio and Tom Holman resurrecting these 200-year-old laws that are coming back now into fashion to, well, move out the gang members and the illegals out of our country? How do you feel about the old laws coming back in?
Well, everybody acts outraged by it, but they're still on the books, and they're on the books for a reason. And we use a lot of old laws. One of the things I deal most often with is false claims. Individuals that are asking for payment from the government that they're not entitled to. The False Claims Act was enacted in the Civil War era. Our asset forfeiture laws are laws that were enacted in admiralty in the 1700s. They were some of the first laws that the Congress enacted. And so, so what? If this is this is not a new law, but it is one that's still on the books. It is similar to other statutes that we have. And so I think that's perfectly fine. If there's a problem with it, then the Supreme Court will tell us that. But there's nothing on as part of our legal the way the laws have developed, it says that after a law is a certain age, you can't use it anymore. So it doesn't bother me a bit, but it'll have to, I'm sure it'll be decided by the Supreme Court, but they will not invalidate the law because of its age. If they were to invalidate it because of some other aspect of it, but not because it was enacted 200 years ago.
Well, it's kind of comical too that the liberal part of the country, the Democrats, it's okay when they use it, like they tried to use the 14th Amendment, okay, with the whole immigration thing. But when the Republicans used it, then it's an old law and it should be outdated.
Well,
It's
the left
typical.
wing is the left wing is all about process. They're all about process and procedures, and that's that's always where they go because often on the merits they don't have much to argue.
Right.
Well, and part two of that, I mean, do you think some of our current laws need a little bit of modernization, right? It hasn't really caught up to speed with everything going online. Our future, well, AI is already here, robotics is already here. It's just, I find that a lot of the laws do need some sort of modernizations. Which would you like to see modernized?
Well, I'll tell you. Let me start in a different way, and that is with respect to like immigration laws. One of the arguments they made in the last administration is we need the Congress to act. And I think what we're seeing in the last 8 weeks is we didn't need the Congress to act, that we have sufficient laws on the books to deal with immigration problems. We have sufficient laws on the books to deal with violent crime and drug crime. But you're exactly right, though. The world is changing dramatically, and where the Congress is having a hard time keeping up is dealing with the pace of technology. AI being one of those things, because I mean, you can now create an image and you can create words and sounds that make it sound like you and I are talking just like we are right now. It turns out it's not us. So there are issues that have to be dealt with there. I think when you see in the area of like cryptocurrency, which is, by the way, not something that I even understand. I understand a little enough to even mention the words, but it seems clear to me that our laws don't necessarily contemplate and envision sort of an alternative system of value. We just deal with our own currency. So I think that they're going to have to take a look at and they are looking at how you deal with types of issues. So to me, it's the technology and the changing world that we live in that is really an issue. But for a lot of our problems, for example, that the president ran on, the laws are totally adequate, and I think we've seen with the decline in the immigration problem just since he took office, that the laws we had were totally adequate, and that was what Mr. Homan was arguing all along.
Yeah, they were on the books. Just follow them.
Yeah. I would say when you look at when you compare the first Trump administration and then the Biden administration, and now what I think will happen in the second Trump administration is really our criminal law problems are really a question of enforcement. And so when you look at what happened in the Trump administration, for example, as I took over as U.S. attorney, prosecutions had fallen in the Eastern District of North Carolina to an all-time low at the federal level. So you had record low numbers for prosecuting violent crime and drug crime and immigration crimes. And we changed that just as they did in every one of the other 93 federal districts as the U.S. attorneys put the pedal down, and we said we're going to prosecute all of these crimes. We're going to follow the executive orders that the president issued at that time, which dealt with gangs and violent crime and drug crime and immigration crime. And so we put the pedal down, we prosecuted those crimes, and you saw the number of prosecutions go up dramatically, and you saw the crime rates go down dramatically. And then as soon as the Biden administration came into office, they took their foot off the pedal for a number of reasons, and they didn't prosecute drug crimes. And they'll say they did, but they didn't when you look at the raw numbers. They didn't prosecute violent crime, and they totally abandoned the prosecution of immigration crime. I mean, in my own office, they dismantled the immigration prosecution apparatus that we'd set up. They let people go. They didn't prosecute anyone. They didn't insist on cooperation from local and state law enforcement. And so now the crime rate went up dramatically. And so I think now what you're going to see from this administration, particularly once they get their people in place, is a return to prosecution. Because if you don't prosecute people and there are no consequences to illegal activity, it's going to increase. And I think they're going to go right back to exactly what we did before. And I think over time you'll see a corresponding dramatic decline in crime rates.
Yeah, well, we want to see the prosecution. That's why we voted for Trump to come in.
Right.
That was, and hopefully promises kept. Well, I want to ask you, how do you, I mean, look, the DOJ, FBI, they're supposed to be separate and independent of the White House. Clearly, in the past few administrations, they're all intertwined. But how do you feel about the DOJ, FBI, etc., now acting on behalf of the Trump agenda. Is there some sort of conflict of interest there? Because that's clearly what the left is
Yeah.
saying right now.
And I
Obviously,
think
they
it,
use it themselves.
I think it depends on what you mean by the agenda, and that is okay. If the directive is let's go get our political enemies, that would be very bad, and I don't believe that's what the president is doing. He didn't do it last time. They suggested he would be going after Hillary Clinton, for example, and one of the first things he did was said, "I'm not going to do that. We want to be about the business of running the country." And so I don't expect him to go after his political enemies. But what I think he is right about is we cannot have a system where anyone is utilizing the awesome power of the federal government, particularly at a criminal level, to pursue political agendas, to pursue their political opponents. And so I think he is looking to root out those people that did that, and good for him. He should do that. And so, but I think more importantly, when you look at the law enforcement agenda that he has laid out, the gangs, the drugs, the violent crime, immigration, the FBI, the Justice Department absolutely should be pursuing those priorities. I mean, that's why the president was elected. That's why the Justice Department, the FBI are part of the executive branch. They are supposed to conform to the political will and policy will is probably really what I should say about that. The policy will, the policy priorities of the president, whoever he or she may be at any given administration. And so I think it would be wrong if they didn't comply with that. Presidents generally, and this one in particular, issues executive orders to define what those policy priorities are going to be. President Trump he issued 3 orders in the last administration. He's issued far more in this one to provide that definition and those guardrails. And the attorney general is required then to sort of follow through and put the meat on the bones, if you will, and give directive. And she will be giving direction to the components of the Justice Department, which include the FBI and every one of those United States attorneys that are ultimately appointed, and they will need to carry out the priorities of the administration. And if they don't, they should be removed from office. And when I was a United States attorney, I would tell the nearly 100 prosecutors that worked for me, I would say if it is not in support of the president's priorities or any additional priorities I give you as United States attorney, we're not doing that work. And so I had no problem telling them we will conform to the directives that the president has provided to us. And that's exactly what has to happen again.
What do you think of Pam Bondi?
Well, I don't know her, but I'm impressed with her. I mean, she certainly is an experienced person. I think she's able to articulate very well, the direction that she and the president want the Justice Department to head policy-wise. She hasn't had a chance to really fill out her staff yet, so she's working a little bit at a disadvantage right now. But that takes time, and she'll get there. But I have high hopes for her, and from what I know, and from people who know her, I have a high opinion of her.
Good. Yeah, I think she's going to do a good job.
Yeah.
Angie?
Yeah, well, Pam Bondi was the Florida Attorney General for quite a number of years. So we had the pleasure of seeing how she performs, and she was about to run for AG again, actually, and then she got the phone call. So I think it was a great pick. I mean, quite honestly, I will full disclosure, I was not a Matt Gaetz fan. When he got picked, I wasn't sure what that was about. That was more political than anything, I thought, because I don't remember Matt Gaetz ever having even been in charge of one single trial. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I don't think he was a real practicing trial lawyer. So it was just strange that he would even be even considered. But there we are.
I'm like you. I don't know anything about that selection, but I will tell you that I was very relieved when it was Pam Bondi and not him. I think
Same.
she's a much better choice.
I think that selection was a sleight of hand. Let's pick the biggest goofball that everybody on both sides of the aisle hates, so we can get these 8 people over here in while they're concentrating on busting him. And I truly believe that, because there was no reason to pick Gaetz. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody knows that he was hated on both sides of the aisle. So I really do. I think it was, Trump putting him out here so he could get these people over here in a lot easier.
Yeah, I don't know. Who
So,
knows? But certainly, I think she is a very credible choice, and I think she'll do really well.
oh yeah. Bobby, I'm gonna switch the I know this story, but I don't mind hearing it again. And I'd like Angie and my wife who's in the background to hear this and our audience to hear this. Tell us about your work with Kosovo after their civil war.
Oh, okay. Well, it's really one of the greatest experiences of my professional and private life. Back in well, Kosovo, for those that don't know, it's a very tiny country, sort of if you looked at the map, it's at the bottom of Serbia. It was part of Serbia, arguably. They take issue with that, and certainly part of the larger Yugoslavia during the communist era in the second half of the 20th century. And so there are many cultural and ethnic differences in that region. And, for example, Kosovars are largely Muslim, but really more of a secular population. But ethnically, they're Albanian. So they're not Serbians, but they really align themselves, historically and culturally and every other way with the country of Albania. But they have been, and they were kind of a breakaway republic after the split up of Yugoslavia. They declared that they were going to be separate from Serbia, and the Serbians came in and conducted a war of ethnic cleansing, and they brutally killed the men and boys in Kosovo, and hundreds of thousands of people fled as refugees. So it was a really, really awful time. And so the U.S., maybe, and the one thing that the Clinton administration did that I agreed with, at least in hindsight, was that they, along with our NATO allies, they intervened in the war of ethnic cleansing and they put a stop to it. And we and the NATO allies have maintained a military presence there ever since. So that was at the end of the 1990s. So we've had a small military presence there ever since. Kosovo declared independence, I believe, in 2008. And a very bold decision, because they didn't have a lot to work with. It's a small country with less than 2 million people inside of its borders, and maybe more than that who are expats living in other countries, including big populations in the United States. And so they declared independence and decided they're going to go it alone, knowing that the Serbians are not going to put up with this. And they did that with the support of the U.S. We were maybe the second country to recognize them as an independent country. So they've been about a country about a year when I was asked by the Justice Department to go there and just deliver a week's worth of lectures. And the idea was the Justice Department often places people in our embassy, career prosecutors in our embassies in third world countries where they believe that they can make some progress in building a criminal justice and a civil based upon the rule of law rather than the whims of politicians. And so they had a legal representative, the Justice Department did a legal representative there in Kosovo, and she was from my office in Raleigh in the Eastern District. And she asked me to come there and to give some lectures along with some other prosecutors that I sent over. And this is why I was the criminal chief of that office. And to just, teach them about drugs and money laundering and, whatever the topics were. So I went over and I delivered that week's worth of lectures. And, it's hard to tell whether they went well or not because of the language barriers and just you don't know who you're really talking to. And so at the end of that week, literally, as I was packing to go to the airport, I was summoned to the embassy. My classes had been taught at a separate location. So I'm summoned to the embassy, and I wasn't told why. And I was afraid that I'd created some problem by something I'd said, because I've been pretty direct with them about what I saw as certain problems. So I go to the embassy, and they invite me to sit down, and they said to me, "Look, thanks for coming. We don't know what to do next." Mm-hmm. And so I was relieved that it wasn't me they were focused on, but we had a very, broad-based conversation about how best to help this country. And, I found myself giving answers that I really hadn't thought through and ultimately agreeing to do things that I wasn't even sure that my boss, the then U.S. attorney, would allow me to do. But we talked about the type of help that the country needed, and that partnering this 2 million, sort of 2 million population country with the vast U.S. Justice Department was sort of a David and Goliath type of arrangement, and that you really needed to partner with people who are more like them, who have sort of the same type of population, the same type of territory, same type of responsibilities. And of course, as I'm saying all this, I'm not anticipating what they're going to say to me, and that was, "You do it. Let's let them partner with the Eastern District of North Carolina." And my wife always tells me I need to think about the consequences of what I say before I say it. And this is one of those situations where I didn't. But it became really one of the most wonderful opportunities I've ever had, because I came back and the U.S. attorney said, "Yes, let's see where this is going." What he actually said to me is, "Let's see where the Lord is leading us on this one." And so we decided to partner with them. And what we did is we became, I hope, good mentors to them. And at least one other colleague and I, we would go over once a quarter, and we would work with the prosecutors and police officers and judges to help them develop their cases, to develop their skills. And we tried to settle on things that we could help them with that would actually make a difference. Because just standing and I've never found that standing and lecturing people about anything produces much in the way of change, that you really need to get in there, roll up your sleeves, and work with them. So we did that. And what we found was that they had something like 10%, the equivalent of 10% of their population under criminal charges. I mean, it doesn't mean that they actually had charged 10%, but they had that number of cases that would equal 10% of their population. So, a couple 100,000 cases in this tiny country, and no ability or no impetus to resolve them. And so we began working with them on the developing plea bargaining and the ability to evaluate cases and resolve them, and really to gain the understanding that by making a deal doesn't show weakness, it shows you're being practical. And so we were able to move them to a better embracing of plea bargaining, but also then to work with them about better performance in the courtroom, better evaluating their cases. Don't pursue cases that really that aren't right, that aren't really based on the rule of law. And so we did that for the better part of 10 years before I left the Justice Department. I made over 40 trips over there to work with them and really develop some of the most wonderful relationships with really well-intentioned people who are trying to do the best they can for their country. That then led to being introduced to a school there that's in the city that is on the border with Serbia, where some of the war was the hottest and most deadly. And the school reached out to me. They had some type of immigration question that they wanted me to help them with. It's an American-run school, and they wanted some help with our embassy there in Kosovo. And so we talked about that. But I really came to really respect and really fall in love with the school. It's run by a woman who's there as a Christian missionary. She's been there for more than 25 years. She was sent there to work in the refugee camps, first in Albania and then over in Kosovo. And she was sent there to address the needs of 700 widows in that city. It's a small city. All their husbands have been murdered. Many of their sons have been murdered. And she went to them, went door to door, talking to the widows, and asked the widows, "What do you need most?" And they said, "Please help us educate our children." And so she began doing that to incredible success. And she's been doing that ever since. And so in the last 5 to 6 years, my wife and I and our sons and my future daughter-in-law to be, and lots of our friends have gone over, and we've worked in the school. Running mock trials and running mock legislatures and teaching cooking and teaching personal hygiene and helping with English language training and you name it, whatever it is. We go over every year, maybe a couple times a year, and work in the school. We also trying to help them raise money, because all of the teachers there are missionaries from the United States who are having to raise their own funds to be there. So they're not paid a salary. They're having to solicit funds themselves to pay to go there. But they go there because of their faith, and they go there because of their commitment to these kids and trying to help them, get a better life. I've taken federal judges with me. I've taken federal prosecutors with me. And it has been really one of the most wonderful experiences of our lives, and we get so much more out of it than we give. But it's been one of those things that I really just feel very blessed to be part of it.
Bobby, how can others help with that if they choose to do that?
Yeah. Well, just let me know if they want to help. I mean, we look for people. We look for people who come over and they want to share their expertise. It doesn't matter what it is. The school is very open to whether you're in business, whether you're in communications, whether you're in law, whether medicine, whatever it is. This is a school that now has students from kindergarten through the 12th grade. And
Amazing.
so, sharing your expertise is very valuable. There's always financial needs. They have an incredible campus that this mission organization that they're a part of raised $5 million to build really a state-of-the-art school that is now used as a focal point in the community. And so
Awesome.
it's incredible. If anybody wants to go and teach, if they're willing to to commit for a year or two, the headmaster, she'll be happy to work something out with them. But there's no limit. It's just a question of what can you bring to the table, and everybody can bring something.
That's an
Right.
incredible
Okay. Good.
story, Bobby. I was not
Isn't that a
expecting
great
that
story?
tonight. It is
Yeah.
so good. I mean, you essentially helped with their justice system
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
new country. And I often joke this to my husband. My husband's British. I often say to him, "You need to go back to Hong Kong to finish up
Yeah. You're
fixing the
right.
laws and the judicial system
Right.
there. They left too early."
Yeah.
So,
Well, and this is to me, Kosovo's and the whole area is really important because this is an area that has long been fought over by all kinds of powers. And we went in there to stop the war for good, very valid humanitarian reasons, but they're also strategically located between the East and the West.
mm,
And you see the tug of war there. The Serbians are really Russian puppets in a lot of ways, and so the Russians are trying to gain influence and a foothold in that part of the world. The Turks are doing the same thing. They are using it. They're establishing sort of a beachhead through advancing the building of mosques and so forth. And then you've got the U.S. and Western allies trying to help them develop a free market, a rule of law system, which is also beneficial to us. And so I think it's a really important country, and it's really important to our national security. And we have an opportunity there that I hope we won't lose. But the Kosovars have a very high opinion of Americans, and I have always been treated
Good.
far better than I deserve when I go there because I'm an American. And it's not so much anymore, but when I first started going there, as I would walk through the hotel lobby, they would all stand, not because of me, but because I was an American. You
wow.
go in every classroom in that school, there's an American flag next to the Kosovo flag. If I went into any
Wow.
government office and met with, as I have, with the president of Kosovo or the minister of justice, there's an American flag in their office too. But they have that high opinion of us, and it's an opportunity for us that we need to utilize well. We have to be respectful of them, and we have to, I think, honor their background and their traditions. But they want to be our friends, and I think we need to make sure that they remain our friends, and we have a real opportunity there. So, hopefully, the work we've done is a really tiny piece of that.
That's awesome. That really is. And it's a good thing to hear that, there's a country in the Middle East that actually likes America.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And I think
you
you'll
know,
find, the Balkans in particular, that the Americans are pretty well regarded because of what they've been through and the role we played, along with the British, along with the NATO allies, and they're still there, keeping the peace. Because I think we all know that if those forces, as small a number as they are, if they left, the whole thing may spring back to life again.
Yeah. And
Robbie,
that,
when you
like,
go,
please, Butch.
no, I'm sorry. When you go over there, how long do you go for?
I usually go and stay either a week or 2 weeks, something like that. I
Okay.
think 2 weeks. I don't think I've stayed beyond 2 weeks. But
Okay.
tell people who are interested, it's a great country. You just go on vacation there. It's beautiful. The food is incredible, and the people are lovely.
Yeah, no, we should all take a trip there.
Awesome.
I
Yeah,
wonder, I mean, I hate to bring it back to politics after such a beautiful story. I wonder how much something like US aid affected various countries, because I read in Thailand, their education system is not collapsing, but they're looking for someone else to pick
yeah,
up the check now that US aid is gone.
yeah.
And I'm afraid that they're going to go to one of our enemies to ask for money.
Yeah. It's a real issue, and I couldn't tell you, I couldn't quantify for you the amount of USAID money that's been spent in Kosovo, but it's considerable. I mean, it's a lot of money. They've been there a long time. It's a mixed bag because I'm sure that they have provided aid that's really essential. But I also saw a lot of waste, and I'll just give you one example. Is early on, I was asked to do a mock trial in the law school at the University of Pristina, which is the capital of Kosovo. And so I go over there and I go to this building where the law school is housed, and it looks like your worst example of Soviet era construction. I mean, it is a building that is falling down. Literally, water is running down the walls of the men's room. And so I go in. I mean, the railings are falling off the stairs. The marble it's awful. And I mean, and I went to a law school that had incredible facilities at Wake Forest. I mean, and so many of our schools are just, they're palaces. So at first I'm going and I'm like, this is a shame that they have to put up with this. And the law degree is basically an undergraduate degree in Kosovo. It's a little different than our postgraduate degree. Anyway, so we're going to go there and we're going to do a mock trial, show them how an American trial works. So we're walking down this hall and I come to a door and it's a stained wooden door. It's beautiful wood, but it's just in the middle of this white wall that is this deteriorating building. And there's a sign next to it that tells us it's a gift of the American people, courtesy of USAID. Okay. You open the door, and I felt like Alice in Wonderland, falling through the looking glass, because inside of it is this mahogany paneled courtroom.
Wow.
I mean, it's incredible. And I mean, rows and rows for the audience, and the counsel tables, and the bench for the judges. And it's even been expanded where 3 judges can sit there, because that's how they sit in Kosovo. They sit in panels of 3. They don't have juries. I mean, this would be beautiful in an American courthouse. It's extraordinary. And so I find out later on that they've spent, I don't know, a couple $1 million on this courtroom in this really terrible building. And then they tell me what year it was built, and I don't remember what year it was, but it was built several years before I was there. And I said, how often do you use this courtroom? And they said to me, you're the first.
No.
And I'm like, you mean to tell me the American people spent like $2 million on this courtroom, which is beautiful, but we've put it in a horrible building, and then we don't use it. And I mean, to me, that became my image of USAID. I'm sure it's an unfair image, but it certainly, as I see and hear the president talk about the waste, I can identify with that.
Mm-hmm. See it. Well, folks, we got to wrap up here pretty soon. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you will join us again. And if everybody will just stick around when we stop recording, we got to download before you get off. But other than that, thank you very much for coming on. I hope people enjoy it. And this is America at Play, and we are out.